Secondly, John Hurd passed away yesterday at the age of 72 in a Palo Alto hotel room as he was recovering from back surgery that he had on Wednesday. So the actual cause of his death hasn't been disclosed yet. Interestingly enough, John Hurd did his last interview on Tuesday with Ileana Douglas, and 5 days later he would be dead. Dean, you interviewed him last year, I think May of last year, for the 35th anniversary of Cutter's Way. And I even called you after I edited that interview, and I said, man, what a surprising interview, because this is a man that did great work. He was in so much that we love, and I don't think he fully realized that there were people out there that were very, very admiring of him and his contribution.
Well, I think you're right. I was re-listening to the show yesterday after I heard of his passing, and I think that even while we were doing the interview and I was mentioning, there's a point where I start mentioning other movies that he's done, not just Cutter's Way, but also and Chili Season of Winter, that we talk about extensively on that interview, but also things like Mind Walk and Cat People, and like when I mentioned Mind Walk, he went, "Oh wow," because he just couldn't believe that somebody had seen it and loved it. And that is a movie that deserves to be seen. It's a little obscure movie. It's kind of a tip of the hat to something like My Dinner with Andre, with Lee Volman and Sam Waterston, and Hurd, kind of walking around the European countryside and having very deep philosophical discussions. But things like Big and Awakenings and Trip to Bountiful, and he really had an extraordinary career. I mean, Heartbeat and On the Yard and Heaven Help Us and Beaches and Rambling Rose. It's just, an amazing career. But I feel like you get the feeling that from the interview that he feels like that he turned into a hack actor, which, if you do look at his career over the past 2 decades, there really is an unfortunate paucity of notable movies.
Really. I mean, what was the great thing about him is like he would pop up in something and suddenly it legitimized what you were watching even more. When John Hurd would pop up in like In the Line of Fire or Snake Eyes, me, and I'm always weird about going back to Radio Flyer because people have different feelings about that movie. I had kind of a abusive stepfather situation when I was younger, so that was one of those movies that's like it's a weird emotional stab to the heart. But he was kind of the good guy in that. He was and like he was an amazing presence in that. And but like post Snake Eyes in '98, he obviously worked really, really hard to get roles, and I have to say that I was having a taco movie afternoon where I was watching bad movies, and I put on Sharknado, and it looked like I'd been hit by a brick when I saw John Hurd in the first 10 minutes in that movie, and I'm like, what the fuck is John Hurd doing in Sharknado? Like in third billing after Tara Reid? I mean, please. So,
I mean, he's literally only in it for 5 minutes, and that's in Sharknado. I mean, like he pops up in something like I think he's in that Too Big to Fail, the HBO movie, but he's literally only in it for like 15 seconds. He has literally the first shot in the movie that has a human in it, and you see him coming off an airplane and or a helicopter and making a phone call, and that's the last you see of him. And it seems like there were a lot of roles like that. Like I know he was in Denzel Washington's The Great Debaters, and in that he plays a Southern sheriff, and I think he's only in that for 1 or 2 scenes. So, he was. I think he was a little tortured. He was obviously according to Daniel Stern, who was a great friend of his from back in the New York days, wrote a really beautiful sort of eulogy for him after hearing of his death, and said, back in 75 to 85, no one could touch John Hurd in terms of cool, in terms of talent, because he was very big on stage. When he started making movies, I didn't even realize this, but by the time he had started making movies, he was already like in his early 30s. See, when I was talking to him over the phone, I was thinking he was much younger, like at least 10 years younger than he really was. But he died at age 72. So he was
and plus he when he started in the theater, he was major in the theater scene, and back when he started in it, that was a very close-knit community, and he was working with people that would eventually become giants and have very successful careers. People like Al Pacino. That was in his inner circle, and so, but it's one of those kind of mystifying things that kind of escape definition. Like, who has it to be a star, like an above the marquee star, or who will be the character actor?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those roads will merge here and there, but John Hurt was one of those essential presences as a character actor that would pop up in something like The Sopranos, and he would make it an indelible character,
Mm-hmm. He had a very specific kind of vocal tone and delivery that was really kind of unlike anybody else's, and he was mainly a stage actor. I think that was where his real passion in acting lay, and I think you could get this from the interview that we had. That obviously, in working in those movies, his first movies, he wasn't quite up to snuff in terms of what had to be done in order to make the movie, and I think that frustrated his acting ability, or it frustrated him, not his acting ability, but it just frustrated him to have to wait to give the performance because there's so much preparation that needed to be done, and I think that kind of reaction to the work of other people is something that might have affected his ability to enjoy doing movies, and maybe that's the reason that he concentrated on smaller parts, because if he had a larger part, it would get very frustrating for him, I suppose.
Right.
Well, I recommend everyone see. The reason why Cutter's Way, he's great in Cutter's Way, and Cutter's Way is a great unsung movie. But one of the particular reasons why that movie is so surprising is that I would never have thought of casting John Hurd in that role. At that time, I would think a role like that would go to somebody like John Savage or someone like that.
And I
John
was
Hurd,
literally just going to say that John Savage is like, I for years I got them confused just because they had that same type of delivery, and it wasn't till John Hurd got a little older and packed on a few more pounds, and I started distinguishing between them. But they both had that very edgy kind of, they both brought that thing to a role that would you just couldn't believe it. They'd walk in and they'd steal the movie in like 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you can really watch Cutter's Way. If you know John Hurd from Home Alone and The Pelican Brief and those kinds of turns, you won't know who that is in Cutter's Way.
Yeah.
Which has to be the ultimate compliment for an actor. That's quite a performance, man.
He gave everything that he had to that, and I would posit that also in Chili Season Winter is also, even though he's not caked under any kind of makeup or anything, that's also another one that I rewatched that one yesterday, after listening to the interview, and got a little verklempt over it actually. But that movie always, hits me in the gut. But I'm sitting there watching the movie, and I'm like thinking about that old aphorism of that I've been thinking about more and more lately. That Howard Hawks had of like, well, what makes a great movie? Well, all you need in a great movie is 3 fantastic scenes and no bad ones. And I'm like, wow, this movie really does that. It really does, proves that to be true. But I find both of those performances extraordinary. But there's so many others. I mean, I love him in After Hours. That scene where he's where he finds out that his girlfriend Marcy has killed herself, and we find out that it's the same character that Griffin Dunn's been chasing after, Rosanna Arquette. Is devastating. It's devastating. He only has about 3 scenes in the movie, but he makes a real impression, and he did that over and over again. Now later on, he got a little typecast. I feel like as sort of like the yuppie asshole in things like Big and Awakenings. Like kind of an executive jerkwad that is in there to frustrate the hero's progress.
Right.
And I think an actor as smart as that knows he's starting to be typecast, and that's when I'm sure if they're smart enough, they feel that slide.
People, there's such a cynicism today where, I'm not talking about John Hurt necessarily, but when you talk about a certain actor, and they always bring up like their worst movie, and they say, he was great and blah, 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 and it's to kind of dismiss them. But there are undeniably great actors out there, and you could see it in their work when they're given the opportunities. So whatever career slide somebody like John Hurt might have suffered, it just speaks to the limited thinking of the people that were hiring him, not his abilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.